Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from different parts of the world and continents. This is another Sunday culture storytelling session where we share our lifestyle, food, travel, history, people stories from a local perspective. Today it's quite special because finally we are getting into the territory of Africa. We are very, very lucky to have Juanita, who lives in Tunisia, North Africa. So I am going to spotlight Juanita for everyone. Hi, Juanita. Can you
Hello.
can you briefly introduce yourself? Where are you from, and where are you now? What you have been up to?
That's the big question. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and lived there my whole life, the rainforest, and went from the rainforest to the desert, the complete opposite. And I've lived in Tunisia now for over 14 years, nearly 15 years. And I will talk a little bit more about how I got here and why I moved here when we start the presentation.
Fantastic. I love the background of your room. It looks really cozy and exotic to me compared to
This
my
is the
family.
house I built, and actually it's a story in itself, the building of this house. I'm laughing, but yeah, it's a cultural story in itself. So I built it during the Tunisian Revolution, and the wall behind you, I grouted by hand, literally by hand myself, and cleaned the cement on the outside of the wall and the inside of the wall. It's a long story, but
We have to invite you for another session. I nail you down for this one. Before we start the wonderful presentation, you shared a photo and video with us, and you're going to tell your story. Can we just try to understand a little bit about the demographics in Tunisia? Who are Tunisians? Are they Black? Are they Jewish? Are they Arabs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before we even get started on it's very fitting that since this is the first country in Africa, the word Africa was named in Tunisia. So the Romans, when they first came, when they came to Tunisia, they called it Yafrik, and it was meant for the whole land. And that evolved into Africa. And then Tunisia broke off, and now it has the name Tunisia. But originally, Afrika was all of Africa, and it originated in Tunisia. So this is a perfect place to start Africa, actually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Tunisians.
So yeah, the people of Africa or of Tunisia. It's really interesting, and it took me. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, people get mixed up Bedouins and Berbers. What's a Bedouin? What's a Berber? Are they the same? So I will talk about, other than expats or Western people, there's a few Western people living here, but the main population is the Arabs, of course, and they're the ones that came down and took over. And they're the main part of the population, but they're more in the north. In the south, where I live and where most of our tours are, it's almost like a different country. It's like going back in time. So as well in Tunisia, there's a huge Jewish population. They've lived here longer than the Arabs.
Wow.
In fact, there's a synagogue that is considered to be one of the oldest synagogues in the world. And it's a pilgrimage site for many Jewish people. It's one of the 5 pilgrimage sites on the island of Jerba. So yes, there's a strong Jewish population here, mostly in Tunis and Jerba. And then there's also a large amount of Black people, and that came from the slave trade. Now, the Sahara Desert, as you know, was part of the Silk Route, and where spices and slaves, salt got brought up by camel through the Sahara up to the ports, to Europe and China, you know, so all through to China. So that was part of the route. It doesn't get recognized or noticed as much because people always know the China to India to, you know, that part of the Silk Route. But the Sahara Desert was an integral part to that. And so there was, when slavery ended, there was, you know, a significant amount of Black people that ended up here in the north. And now they're Muslims, they're Tunisians. They've lived here for generations now. So yeah, there's a lot of Black people. And then there's Berbers. Now, Berbers are the original people of North Africa. So they're the Aboriginal people. There's more Berbers in Morocco and Algeria than there is in Tunisia. Tunisia, they don't have a written language, just an oral language, and they have signs, symbols. So when you go to old Berber houses and buildings, you can see some of these symbols, and I'll talk more about that later. But they're the first people of Tunisia. Amazigh is the tribe of the Berbers here. And then there's Bedouins. Now, Bedouins are also Arabs, but they're not the same Arabs that came in and conquered. They lived as nomads for centuries. In fact, the Bedouins of the south here have only lived in, they're now semi-nomadic. So they've lived in villages half and half for a generation and a half. So some of our cameliers were born in the desert. They were, I'll talk to you about one of them who was a nomad for 35 years. So there's still a strong connection to the Sahara. In fact, the Berbers and Bedouins of the south have more in common than the Bedouins have with the Arabs, even though they're the same blood, because it's a southern culture. It's a simple way of life. It's a very basic way of life. The north is much more modern.
Oh, Juanita, just with these introductions and briefings, I'm fully convinced you lived there for 15 years and you really can represent a local perspective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you like me to share the slides now so you can start?
Yeah, let's do that.
There are 3 parts of the presentation, and for people in the group, whenever you have questions, feel free to type in the chat box so that we can take opportunities to answer your questions. Are you now seeing the slides, everybody?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah, we're seeing the first one, yeah.
Great. So there are 3 parts of the talk today. First, I actually asked Juanita to share with us her story, why she moved there.
So this is a picture. I'll give you a little bit of background. This is a picture of myself, obviously, and my first camel. That was 15 years ago. I bought him to show how much I loved camels long before I moved here. I bought him a year before I even considered moving here because I've loved camels and deserts and Arabic culture my whole life. I was also a belly dance instructor in Canada. I was a social worker during the day and a belly dance instructor at night. But so there was a lot about the Arabic culture I've always liked, but camels has always been something I just adored. To me, they're the complete opposites. They're ugly and beautiful. They're graceful and awkward. They're haughty and humble. Like every opposite word you can think of that describes a camel. So this camel, Lasfar, he's no longer with us. I was devastated when he died, but he was my first camel. So my first camel trek as a tourist, I came here, I think it was 2006. And Meki, who's now works with Sahha Sahara, he was a camelier, and this was his camel. I fell in love with Lasfar and the Sahara, of course, even more so. And before I left, it was a 10-day trek, camel trek. Before I left, I said to Meki, would you let me buy him? Because I can't see myself living the rest of my life and not owning a camel. So I said, you take care of him. You know, he'll live here and I'll come and visit him, but he'll be mine. And so, of course, he was happy to do that. And I knew that Lasfar would be loved and taken care of and that he was mine. So then I did move here a year later and he became mine a little bit more officially. But yeah, camels were a large draw. In fact, one of the reasons why I ended up moving here, I always knew I would leave Canada. I love Canada, but I'm the youngest of 8 children. My parents were born in Russia. They lived through the Russian Revolution. I won't get into all that. They moved to Canada. So my paternal family, especially my grandparents, my uncles and aunts, there was such a rich culture and strong family ties, but also just a rich culture. And when they passed away, I know Canada has a lot of culture, but it felt like there was something missing for me. So I always knew I would leave Canada. So it was just a matter of where. I fell in love with Turkey. I never considered moving there, but for one of the reasons, there wasn't enough camels. That was the picture for me. And there was not really a desert. So let's see, should we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is a video of my second camel I still have, he's a racing camel. He's actually an Algerian Touareg camel. And the saddle is different than what we have on normal treks because there's nothing to hold on to on this saddle. I'll tell a little bit more when this video is finished. The quality is terrible.
Well, Juanita, you just gave me the idea for my next Christmas gift.
What?
I'm gonna ask my husband to give a camel. Great.
There you go. Okay, so this next, so when I was talking before about, I lost so much when my uncles and aunts and grandparents died. Seeing the people in Tunisia, especially South Tunisia, you can see by this woman's face, and you can't see, but it just touched something with me that it just fit into place. I felt like I had known these people all my life. I would meet people on the street, and especially old people, they have so many stories, and I just smile and we gravitate towards one another and hug. And so that's another reason why I fell in love with Tunisia is the people.
Yeah. So we got a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
Would you be able to answer? Number one is from Stephen. Population of North Africa would be different prior to Islamic expansion in like 18th century, surely?
Yes, was very different. I mean, the history of the people that have lived here, it's just unbelievable, from the Carthaginians to the Romans to the Vandals to, I mean, pirates. And if you're looking for a history, all the information on the history, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'd have to look it up myself because it's so full.
The second question is slightly easier. From Vivian Andrea in Singapore, what's the price range for a camel?
Okay, that varies from year to year, and it's like anything. It's availability, and what's available in it and how many people are wanting to buy and what the economy is like. When I first bought Lasfar, this was like 15 years ago or 16, I think I paid 1,000 dinars for him, which is, I know in Canadian, that's about $500. I don't know what that is in UK.
Mm.
And then they've gone down and they've gone up, but it also depends on the age. It depends on whether it's a male or female. And so now they range anywhere from 1,000 dinars to 10,000 dinars, depending on what you want. I mean, the age is also important because anything under 4 years old, you technically shouldn't be working them before then. So they're not making any money. So you're feeding them, and camels eat a lot. So of course, a younger camel is going to be cheaper because you have to pay for the food.
I guess we get one more question about a camel.
Yeah.
How do you train a camel?
Not me. I leave that to the experts. If I had to train a camel, I think it would probably be the worst camel in the world. It's very interesting on treks, though, to watch them. All the cameleers, I mean, that's one of the reasons I've picked them is, I mean, other than all the other skills and kindness and everything else they have, but loving their camels and being good to their camels, because I'm such an animal lover, is really important to me. So they teach them in a way that's very, you have to be strong with them, but loving with them. So first they find another camel for it to bond with. Let's say you've got a baby camel. You find an older camel for it to bond with, one that's going to be on the treks with them on a regular basis. So it just comes and it's free. So it comes on the trek, it's not tied, but because it's bonded with this adult camel, it won't leave. So it always stays by. So it gets used to traveling with other camels. Then eventually they'll put a muzzle on it and a rope. Now that's the hardest part because they don't like that. And it depends on the personality of the camel as well. Some of them are easier than others. And then eventually they'll just put a saddle on them. And so it's a slow process to get them to actually working. So ideally you want to start them about 2 years old just to come as, for a vacation on a trek. And then eventually by 4, they'll be maybe carrying guests.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
We're learning a lot about camels. That next year we will have a lot of camels as pets.
Oh, I tell you, I could do 5 talks just on camel trivia.
So would you like to continue for the second part of your talk? So that's local culture.
Okay, go ahead. So your question was how is the local culture different than mine was in Canada? Well, I mean, just looking at the picture, it's very obvious. But the next section, I have some really funny stories of my first years here in the south of Tunisia. Now, I have to also digress a bit and say when people move to Tunis or Sousse or some of the bigger places in the north, their experience is very different than mine living in a Bedouin village of 200 people in the south of Tunisia. It's a completely different experience. So, you'll probably hear, oh, Tunisia is modern. Yes, it is. And in many parts of it, it's very modern, but there's also pockets of it that people live very traditionally. So this picture, the woman on the right behind the little boy, she's no longer with us. This was I was telling you about Meki, the guy whose camel I bought, that's his grandmother, and she died. She was just such a wonderful woman. She has nothing to do with the story I'm telling, but it was a good picture. So my first year living here, does everyone know what Ramadan and Eid is?
I know Ramadan, but not really.
Yeah, it's Ramadan right now. So Ramadan is the month of fasting. And then Eid is the 3 days. There's two Eids. One Eid right after Ramadan, which is coming up. And then there's another Eid that's around in November, roughly, every year. So that's the one where people will kill a sheep if they can afford it. Most families traditionally kill a sheep and then they dry it or whatever they do to make it last as long as they can. So an Eid is the Eid after where people buy a sheep. It's a big deal. The kids all get new clothes. And it's like Christmas. It's like Christmas is to Western people. So I got invited to an Eid party. So I went to this family home. There's a courtyard in the middle of the house. And there's people all over and I'm talking to people. And in the back of my mind, I kept hearing whack, whack, like a thumping noise. And I didn't pay much attention because I was talking to people. And finally, it got a little quiet. I went and sat on a step and just started looking around. Where was this whack, whack, whack coming from? And seated royally with her outfit like this, on the middle of the cement on the courtyard, this big Bedouin woman. These are Bedouins, by the way. A big Bedouin woman, legs spread out. Between her legs is a sheep head that I hope no one gets grossed out. A sheep head with an axe embedded in its head. And she's whacking this sheep head on the cement, trying to crack it in half so she can roast it. And in that moment, you know, it hadn't been that long ago that I was in Vancouver. And I looked around and I just thought, how did I get here? This was my reality now. This was my life. And it was just one of those moments that,
sorry,
it just, you know, I had to shake my head. So that was one of my first experiences of how this culture is very different. Nothing gets wasted, by the way. The animals are all free range, and being an animal lover, I had, you know, a hard time at first with the idea, but I've seen how they're killed. I've seen how they live a happy life, you know, and then they have a bad day and, and then they become dinner. I actually raised sheep and goats for about 3 years. So, and there was one time I was hugging one of my sheep, Emma, and I was smelling her, and all of a sudden I smelled barbecue, and I said, "I'm sorry, Emma." Okay, so we can see the next video then. This is a desert party, and you can see there's stations where, and they just automatically organize themselves into who's going to be baking the bread. We brought a goat with us, and the goat has been butchered now, so you'll see that. This is Sufi music. So that's it for that one. So if you want to go to the next picture. Maybe before we go on to the next part of it, does anybody have any questions about killing sheep and goats or anything that wasn't that part of the...
I think we're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, the next part of what's different is obviously the people that live here. So these are 3 Berber men, And there's specific Berber costumes or clothing and Bedouin clothing. But now, since they've lived together so much in the south, they kind of wear each other's, depend on what they need. So the man on the right is wearing what's called a kashabia, which some of you know more from Star Wars. People come here and say, oh, they've got Star Wars things. And I say, no, Star Wars took their things.
I see.
And then the shesh is the headscarf in the middle. And the man on the left is wearing more of a traditional Arabic hat, which is a shashia.
Mm.
So we can go to the next picture. So this is Kharia. I've known her since I first moved here and watched her kids grow up. And since this part of the presentation is about how things are different, how the culture is different than Canada, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. But there's another funny story. Before I built my house, I lived in an apartment in Douze, which is it's close to where I live now, very close. But it's about 35,000 people, so it's bigger. It's a town. So I lived in an apartment, and it had stairs, a flight of stairs. And wanting to be a good host, I invited Haria and her sister to come for a visit. So I was in my apartment, and I heard this giggling and screaming, like laughing and screaming. And I opened my door, and here was Haria and her sister climbing up the stairs on their hands and knees. They had never climbed stairs before. Like, that still shocks me.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and even though the stairs had walls on both sides, there was, they couldn't fall to the side. They were petrified. I mean, they were laughing about it, but they were petrified climbing up. And for the longest time, she was afraid when her kids would climb up and down my stairs. So yeah, that's another story that really shows how different it is. So that's kind of the end of that section.
Would you like to get on to why Sahha Sahara?
Yeah. So I had lived here. Go ahead, do the video.
What a stunning video.
Yeah, it is. We're so lucky to have that. One of our guests took that. He brought a drone from Europe and took that video for us. So, when I first moved here, I mean, like I said, one of the reasons why I came here was for the Sahara. And the longer I lived here for 4 years before I started Sahha Sahara. And was fortunate enough to explore areas where that most agencies don't take people, and did expeditions looking for routes and off the beaten track, as they say. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start Sahha Sahara is, I thought so many people come here, and most agencies there's certain routes that they always do, and they're nice, but there's so many other places that are just incredible. And that's what I wanted to share. I started off sharing it with friends and family before I started Sahha Sahara, and then it evolved into Sahha Sahara. This is part of our team of Cameliers and myself.
Next slide.
Yeah, next slide. Our next picture. Another thing that is really important to me is respect of the culture and sharing the culture and connecting people. This was a guest's son. They brought their 2 kids, and we did a camel trek, and then we stayed a night at a Bedouin camp. And this boy is one of our Camelier's sons. And so they spent the night there, and the kids got to interact with the Bedouin kids. And this moment, it still gives me shivers. It was like this little boy, Najim, shared with the guests what he had that was a treasure to him, which was a beetle. And both, you know, it was such a boy thing. And it was just one of those moments where you can see two completely different cultures, you know, and it just shows kids are kids, people are people.
Which language they use to communicate with each other?
No language. And, you know, that's the thing because these people don't speak English. And what's interesting is a lot of people in the South don't even speak French. Or if they do, it's just with guests. People who speak French are people who work with tourists. So a lot of the men who work in tourism, who are cameliers, they'll speak French, but many of the women don't. But it's just surprising. And even when we do camel treks, our guests are primarily English. People find a way of communicating. You communicate through looks, through gestures, through sign language, and it's unbelievable how people can find ways of communicating that's not in language.
Shall I play the next video now?
Yeah, and then I'll explain it.
What's that?
So this is called zibda, which literally means butter, but it's goat butter. And she makes it look so easy. They put it inside a cleaned out goat skin that's made specifically for this. So they put the goat's milk in it, and they just kind of shake it and move it. And it doesn't take long, pat it. I mean, I don't know how they do it.
Wow.
And it's delicious. It's like a cross between a yogurt and a butter, and you dip bread in it.
Something to try when we travel.
Yeah. And that's just also, and she's in a Bedouin tent there, and it just shows, you know, how it's important to us to preserve the culture. And so a lot of our treks and tours, we really try and integrate that into it so we can keep the culture going. We don't want the culture to die. So now I'm going to be talking about, on our treks, people have the option. The night in the Sahara, you will always sleep in a Bedouin tent. But if you go on another trek, you can elect to sleep in a Bedouin tent. It costs extra because it takes one camel to carry a tent. They're very, very heavy. And we also want to support the people who made them. So this shows how a Bedouin tent is made. They're handmade. And this is also a way of supporting the local people. All their saddle bags are handmade. The saddles are handmade. The Bedouin tent, it's all made by hand. And these are women in the community, men in the community. And it's all a way of supporting the community. So here's shearing sheep. And you can go to the next one. And the one on the left is my friend Hadia, the one I told you about. And the one on the right is Fatma. And so I didn't show any pictures in between. So they shear the sheep, then they brush the wool, then they spin it. It looks like a dreidel, and they do it with their toe I don't know how they do it, but it's unbelievable. So they spin it into a ball of yarn. Then they make strips of wool, and it's a combination of sheep and goat. Sometimes it used to be camel too, but camel wool is very expensive now, and so they sell it if they can. So they weave it into strips about 1/2 meter wide. And then now this is towards the end, they're sewing the strips together, which will end up to be the Bedouin tent. So you can show the next one.
Wow, it's beautiful.
So that's 2 of our guests sleeping in a Bedouin tent. And that took 2 years to make.
One tent.
One tent.
How long does it last?
years, and you can repair them years and years and years and years. Yeah.
Does it keep?
But they weigh a ton. So now here's a video of our team, the Cameliers. This was our 10-year anniversary video. We had a party.
لا ودي بالصوت هذا ما يجيبهاش كاس جيبها باللي حتى
جيبها
لك انا بالتي احسن
جيبها كلامي زي هذيك قال لي تنجيبها لك بالتي احسن
لا لطف انا ما قلتلكش بهذا لا
امشي بشويش امشي
قابلني الغزلان يرتع بينا صحان شايش للجفلان في الخطوه زرم
اي
عينت الختلان شاف خيالي بان زلبحني جيان جيت بالغشم
واي
يا غريبه يا حنين فلاحي خرني انور رجولي لمحان حدثني الشيطان صور لي اللي ثم لبسها الكتان وحرمات الوان ضلايب مرجان على الصدر منظم يا غبايني
صلي على النبي تربح الله يسلمك ظهري باسم
ولا كان ندري الطب في ملقاها مرايات نعملها لباس عيون ايه ولا كان ندري الطب في ملقاها مرايات نعملها لباس عيون حومت والتجار نجلباها عناق ليلي ما بين الصحون
يا لطيف
اللهم صل على محمد
صلى الله عليه وسلم
ومن قدها الغنجة رقيقة حجاها علي بن حمد يميتي مغبون تمنيت في الخاطر عشير عماها ومغفور شعر بن زبرون
يا حنين
مريد دايم الغنجة رقيقة حجاها اللي هذبها يكوي جعب مقرون وكان متتا نطلب سماحي فيها وفي ديارهم بين العتب مدفون وتخرج علي يعفس ورجلها ولها ثنية قرون بعد قرون والنفس هانت هينه وهناه على زور طفلة تلبس المنظوم هو يا صاحبي مني عطيت عزاه وصدق الدم على سميح اللون وكرسي تقول البنت عاشق فيها طفلة عريضة زينها متموم ياي طفلة عريضة زينها متموم وصدقتها وحطوا العساس عليها ومن الناس كفرة دونها ملكوم هريد زول خارج في الباس تعدى ردف كحتي وخلف علي الفد خرج بخلاع العمهوج والفي بالوقطات الداعة وهزت قدايا عين هالياعك ويهذبها كي من طبع في القد وشرشور دقله في الغلف نتاعه ومن حبسته لخدم لصد خرج بجعارة ومثلت هالعمهوس ودنظارة قبطان ولا بي حكم وزارة وبيعت له بكلام رجال صغير قسمها كبتني شطارة وسود الحجيل عمهوج تايه ند سود الحجيل مثلها وسود الحجيل سلسة نظيفة عضلها وربي يعطي من حازها وعقلها وغابر سواله من قديم ورد ويا رب سيدي قدرتك سهلها لصغير مرتاش لي مد ريت زول خارج في الباس تعدى ردف كحتي وخلف علي الفد يزيك
Wow.
So that was our 10-year anniversary party, just
So,
before COVID.
so did you, which language they were using? Was it
That's
Chinese?
Arabic.
And
But there's different dialects. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. There's different dialects of Arabic. The Tunisian dialect is very different than generic Arabic from other countries. Like Egypt has a very different dialect. Not only that, but the north to the south of Tunisia, there's different dialects. So some completely different words. Like in the north, you'll say, even saying hello. In the north, they'll say Aslam. How are you? In the south, it's completely different words.
we
So
got
you can tell by where a person is from just by how they talk. the
We
words
got
they
quite a
use,
few
even though they can
questions.
understand each other. Hmm?
We got quite a few questions.
Yeah.
Is it okay to have a Q&A time now?
Yes, a few questions and then I'll go on to the last part here.
Have you seen a mirage in Sahara? Is it always there at the same time, same place?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of times, even in the car, like you've probably seen mirages in other parts of the world when the weather is really hot and you know the circumstances are just right. You'll think you see something, but it's not really obvious. It's not where somebody said, "Oh, there's a lake," and there isn't a lake. It just sometimes you think, oh, is that water ahead? Is that water ahead? And you know there's not.
What's the local language?
The official language is Arabic and the second language is French. And like I said, in the south, they speak a slightly different dialect of Arabic. And then there's also the Berber language. 2/3 of the Berbers in the southeast of Tunisia speak Berber in their homes. So yeah, it's
Funny,
very
thanks
different.
for the patience. There are just more and more
Oh.
questions coming up for you now.
Yeah.
What's your favorite local food? And is there anything you wouldn't want to eat?
Yeah, I have my rules as far as what I won't want to eat. The people laugh at me when I finally got strong enough to say, these are things I won't eat. I won't eat brain, even though it's supposed to be really good. But I know I just can't do that. It's just too far away from where I came from. No, there's so many delicious meals. Kusha is one of them. We have it on our trucks. It's baked in a clay pot in the sand, and it's lamb with rosemary and tomatoes and peppers and olive oil, and it's just like that. It's baked. It's delicious. Melt in your mouth.
I bet you just made everybody hungry now. If they are selling off whatever camel wool is available, does it mean that a skill is being lost in the processing of it? That's a good one.
Sorry, I missed that question.
Because you mentioned they actually sell off camel wools. So the question is, if they sell these wools instead of processing it, is that skill being lost?
No, I mean, it's not lost. It's just there's very little of it because there's only a certain age where you can use the camel wool, which is when they're a baby. So there's not that much of it. And, you know, a little bit of camel trivia that you probably don't know is all the camels you've seen on this video. And if you go on treks, the camels you see will be male camels. So the male camels do all the work. The female camels live free in the desert. You'll see them sometimes wandering in the desert. You'll see them on the side of the road. So they live free with their babies until their babies are about 2 years old. So people that have male camels and that are cameleers, it's like there's a different group of people that raise the females. So the people that are all my friends basically are cameleers, the ones that raise the male camels. I know some people who raise female camels, but it's a very different
trade.
Yeah.
How often does it rain in Sahara Desert?
Well, as you could probably see by the pictures, not often enough. Coming from Canada, the rainforest, I mean, one of the things I hated about Vancouver, which is very much like London, is all the rain. So when I first moved here, every time it would rain, I'd be like, no. And we've even had guests from UK, you know, they'd see it start to rain and they just freak out. And you know, it took me years to realize, no, it might rain for a few minutes, but it'll dry really quickly. And it's basically, it's almost a non-event. In January, there is sometimes where there's like torrential rain pours, but that's it for the year then.
So many questions, Juanita, so many questions. I know you speak Arabic a little, so this question is related to language. Have you learned to speak their language or do you undertake it to some degree?
The local dialect of Arabic has been really, really hard to learn. First of all, I'm the first person to admit I'm terrible at languages, so that's the first part. The second part is there's almost no written books like lessons from from English to Tunisian Arabic. So I would have to learn French too, which I come from English speaking Canada. So I had to learn everything I know. And plus I live in the South, and that's where my priority was to be able to work with the people here. So that I had to just focus on that. So basically it was listening to sounds, asking people. So it's been a slow process, which is why after 14 years, my Arabic, I still haven't mastered it.
Because you had to learn French first.
No, I didn't learn French first. I mean, it would have been, I started to do that, but then I realized it was going to take too long, and it didn't work because the people here in the South only speak French when they're speaking to tourists. So I would try and get practice, but I don't speak it well enough to practice. So they would switch to Arabic. So it was just very confusing. So I just thought, no, I have to bite the bullet and just learn Arabic right from the get-go. So that's been my process.
Wow.
Right or wrong, that's the way I've had to do it.
It's almost like a reborn process.
It is.
How do you get internet in a 200 people village? Has it improved recently?
No, I have internet in Dues here. It's like we have our brownouts, where the power goes off. We have, it's a third world country, and in the north the services are better, but in the south they're not. So you have periods where it's just not that great. During a sandstorm or a sandy day, it's not as good. So yeah, no, I couldn't live without internet. I think that's the one thing that living so far away from my kids, and that would be, when I go off into the desert, of course I don't have it, but at home I do.
So I know we still have one more part to cover. So
yeah.
Let's do that. Yeah. Let's do that then. If people have questions, Juanita, is it okay for me to share your email address in the chat box?
Yes.
So you can contact you directly.
Yes.
Okay. So,
and the website, they can probably get a lot of answers from the website first, and then
yeah,
the email is absolutely no problem. Yeah.
So
I'd be happy to answer any questions. So this is his name is Ali Bashwisha. We call him Bashwisha. He was the man that was singing in the last video. He was a nomad for 35 years. 35 years he lived in the desert. 2 years he spent without seeing another human being. He was in the desert. Like, try and wrap your head around that. Not seeing another human being in the Sahara for 2 years. So the song that he sang in the previous video, that was he's a poet as well, obviously. He wrote that song while he was in the desert during that 2 years. And it's the most romantic song I've ever heard. It's all Arabic songs are love songs, or most of them, or love of the Sahara or a woman. But this particular one was a woman. And there's one phrase in there, I think, if there's any guys who need the perfect romantic line, this is from Bashwisha. When I die, I wish they will bury me in front of your doorstep so that I can feel your steps on me every day. That gets me every time. That's just, so that was his song. And he's the most amazing. The other cameleers look up to him. He's a legend. There will never be another guy like him. His generation is dying, and with that skill. For example, we were on a trek, and I've been in 2 desert actual sandstorms in the Sahara, 2 true sandstorms. Many windy days where we need goggles, we bring goggles, but 2 sandstorms where you cannot see your hand in front of your face. You can't tell where the ground is because everything is swirling brown. So we were with a guest. Lucky she had the time of her life and she trusted these guys. But we couldn't stop because you can't set up a tent in that. So we basically, and Bashwisha was the head cameleer. He's the head cameleer on many of there's a couple of them on the longer treks. This was an 8-day trek. And we went a day and a half trekking in one day. we lost the group of camels in front of us, not lost them, but we couldn't see them much of the time. So the first group would wait for us until we got close. And that was Bashwisha. He led us. He found his way to where we needed to go. When people ask me, how do they navigate the desert? Some people say the stars, the moon, but that proved to me that I believe it's in their DNA. From being nomads in the desert for generations and generations. There was absolutely nothing that could help him navigate that sandstorm. And I wasn't afraid because I knew him already at that point, and I knew he would get us there and take care of us. I mean, these guys, when we take people on a camel trek, I have to trust them with everything, and I do. And he got us there absolutely no problem. And to me, that just shows how good he is. One of the expeditions we went on looking for new routes, we came to the top of a dune and Bashwisha sniffed his nose and he looked around, he said, they're making coal. That's a process sometimes they do in the desert, the Bedouins, to make extra money. He said, and it's a smell of smoke apparently. He said, they're making coal. I know they are. And the other Bedouins, the other cameliers said, oh, I don't smell it, I don't smell it. But Bashwisha said they're making coal. 2 days later, we found them. And I couldn't smell it until we were like close to them, but he could smell it 2 days ahead of time. So to me, that just shows such skill. So that's Bashwisha. We call him GPS Bashwisha. So this is one of our camel treks, one of our 8-day camel treks. You can see why I love the Sahara. Maybe you can't, but this is one of the reasons why I love the Sahara. Some of our guests, and there's GPS Bashwisha in the front there. And the next thing we're going to talk about is our tours. We've evolved into tours of South Tunisia too, some of the places I've discovered. Oh, we're still on treks here. This is Ali Shanab, another one of our sage cameliers. He's wearing a handmade wool kashabia. And next one, the night sky. Photo from one of our guests. We had 2 guests who were bluegrass singers from the States, and they were doing a concert in Scotland. And they came and did a night in the Sahara with us before they went, and they brought their fiddles. And it was hilarious to watch the cameliers try and play the fiddle. So we had a real musical, cultural exchange that night. It was a lot of fun. This is at the end of another trek. So we really try and make a connection between, and that took me years because the Bedouins are generally shy. So I kept saying to them, no, the people want to meet you. They want to get to know you. So now they're slowly coming, opening up more and more. Okay, now we're on to tours and people. So this is a Berber woman, and I've known her since my first time here as a tourist as well. When I first met her, her oldest son, who's now 17, was I think around 3. So I've watched her grow up, her kids grow up. She is the most amazing woman. When we do South Tunisia tours, whenever we can, we stop by her house and for a visit because it's great for people to meet a local Berber woman. This is a troglodyte house. So I know we're running out of time, so I'm trying to speed this up a little bit. They lived in a troglodyte house, her and her family, for 5 generations. Troglodyte houses are homes that are, they're a Berber, I could go and do another talk just on Berber architecture. It's so hard to narrow it down. Berbers traditionally built, because they were fleeing from persecution, they built what was available and for the harsh weather. So a troglodyte house is dug underground. It's like a pit is dug straight down. And then from the pit, the sides are dug out into like cave rooms. So that helps with the heat. So they lived in one troglodyte house for 5 generations, fixed up with floods. That's another long story. And I won't get into it, but they had to leave their home from greedy relatives. So now this one here, her husband has built by hand. We've watched them build it from hand. So I've watched him with the pickaxe digging into the soil. She's an amazing woman. My expression is to know Saliha is to love Saliha. She's just a wonderful woman. And we try and, on our tours and our treks, of course, we try and support local communities as much as possible. So even on tours, we will hire local guides to take people to specific places that live in those places. So this is Anis. He's in the Mosque of the Seven Sleepers in South Tunisia. Next one. And this is in a 12th century Berber mountain village that's still inhabited since the 12th century. Oh yeah, anyways, it's so hard for me to stay on track and not digress. So we really try and support family-run restaurants, hotels, whenever absolutely possible. And then we've just got one more short slideshow. This is a troglodyte house. This is Saliha's troglodyte house. You can see the pit dug straight down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and they live in like that. That's their home. This is the village I was telling you about. People have lived there since the 12th century, the Berbers.
What's
And
this
it's not painted or anything strategically, because when the Romans and the people like were after them, they had to hide in the mountains. So they had to blend it in with the mountain. So this is one of the places we take people to. And this is the Medina of Tozer, another beautiful place in the south.
Wow, this is absolutely mind-blowing. It's an uncharted territory you showed us, and your own story is also an uncharted journey you had to navigate. All of it with your instinct.
I'm still navigating.
Yes, and the landscape you showed us, architectures and people are just extraordinarily beautiful. We are at 1 hour now. I don't know if everybody still has a few minutes, because there are still so many questions. When it died, I don't know if you would have extra 5-10 minutes.
Absolutely, no problem.
I have one or two questions. Okay.
Please.
I noticed all the camels only have one hump, and they're camels with two humps.
Yeah.
It seems like they'd be better to ride than one hump camel.
I have to be honest, I've never ridden on a two-hump camel. So I can't tell you what the difference is. But some people have said, because the camels here are dromedaries. So some people have said, oh, dromedaries aren't camels. The other ones are camels. Well, that's actually not true. There's two types of camels, like you said. The two humps are Bactrian and the one hump is dromedary. Bactrian is more in Tibet, the Asian countries, where mostly North Africa and the Arabic countries, and even Australia has the dromedary, the one hump camel.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There are a lot of camels in Australia, and a lot of people don't realize that, but there are a lot, and you can actually go on treks in Australia.
Yeah, I'm friends with a few people who have camel trekking business in Australia, and actually one of them was thinking of coming here, and I had to warn them, because they have a kitchen truck, like it's very modern. It's a great adventure, but they bring a truck with their own chef and kitchen and fridge and I said, there's no fridges, there's no kitchen, there's no toilets. You bring everything in and you take everything out.
Thank you.
But yeah, there's many camels in Australia.
How do you find comfort in the extreme desert weather?
It's actually not as, it sounds worse than it is. So in the summers here in Duz, it can get up to 55 Celsius. So that is hot. That is hot. I don't know what that translates anymore to Fahrenheit, but it's very, very hot. But life is just different during the hot seasons. I mean, first of all, we don't do camel treks, obviously. Even the nomads get out of the desert in July and August. But you wake up early in the morning, you do whatever you have to do in the morning, and you have a long siesta. So I watch some videos, or I read a book, or I have a siesta. I have an air conditioner in my bedroom. So I shut the door. That's the only way I could survive. I'm a Western, there's just no way. I had to think long-term.
Yeah.
Long-term. Do I want to stay here, or do I want to, So, and then and the whole town, everything is shut down in the middle of the day. Like if you walk around Duz, the next bigger town in the middle of the day, it's like a ghost town. You see some things blowing around the village, and that's it. And then around 3:30, 4, depending on how hot it is, everyone comes out again, and then stores are open late, and people are up late, and it's just a different way of life. It's not
It's really answering to nature. If nature asks you to stop working,
It is.
do that.
It is. It's very much. You're absolutely right. And when you go on a camel trek, it's the same thing. It's very interesting process to release, to let go, to go on a trek and say, what's going to happen is going to happen. What the weather, I mean, you can sort of predict. And when we do camel treks, we try and do it at the best season. We tell people, but you can't predict it. This isn't Club Med, right? So when you go out there, it's like you have to surrender yourself and go through the process. And it's actually very interesting, and it's a good thing to let go of technology, let go of all those things.
Absolutely. And it's for us to know only in very limited time and space we can overcome the challenge imposed by nature in broader sense. Nature we have to obey. One question from Stephen about local language. How does one define progress if layers of local language might be disappearing because of economic forces? Are they disappearing?
I don't think they are, because they're so immersed in the home, and people still live in extended family. And I'm thinking of like the Berber, I mean, maybe in time, I see other things disappearing, like the job of cameleer, for example. I think a generation or two from now, there won't be camel treks the way I know it. And that makes me feel sad, and it makes me also feel very lucky that I'm living here during that time. But as far as language, for example, in the Berber villages, yes, in the north, everything's modern and changed, but unless that changes in the south, but if people still continue to live the way they live, in the homes, they learn Berber. They go to grade 1, they learn Arabic. By the time they're I don't know what grade it is, I can't remember, 4 or 5, they're learning French. And grade 8, they're learning English. Those kids know 5 languages. That's pretty amazing. But the first thing they learn is Berber in their home. And the same as the Bedouin dialect of Arabic. When we meet Algerian nomads in the desert, I understand them more than the Arabic in Tunis, because it's all desert kind of dialect.
Do they have Starbucks over there?
No, I wish. Starbucks. I hate when I was in Canada. I was such a
I
snob.
probably
Like,
couldn't
I'm not going to
survive.
Starbucks.
See, I probably couldn't survive.
But if they got one here, in fact, I saw one on I don't know if it was Instagram, but I Googled it, and I said to my friends, and we were in Tunis, and I was in my car, and I said, oh my God, there's a Starbucks. So we used Google Maps, and we're driving everywhere. We drive past it 3 times, like, no, where is it? Where is it? Well, somebody had called their cafe Starbucks. So that was the big disappointment of the day.
I thought you had a Mirage.
And I was not happy.
So thank you so much, Juanita, for showing us a word at least I am least familiar with. I put down Juanita's website called sahhasahara.com and her email address in the chat box. So if you have follow-up questions or in the future you'd like to understand more or travel to South Tunisia and doing her tours and treks, feel free to access her website, Sahha Sahara. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening to my stories, and I hope I didn't put too many of you to sleep.
Thank you. Absolutely no. You raised so many questions and curiosities from us. For everybody in the group who's still here, our cultural storytelling started exactly 1 year ago. Some of us were looking for things to do during a lockdown and decided to do this once a week. Free session to share our lifestyle, food, travel, history, inspiring people like some of us in the group to talk about their passion. Coming Sunday, we will have a special event that is to celebrate our 1 year birthday. It's a very small baby, still at its infant stage, but we just want to thank everybody for traveling with us together for 51 times during a special year. And there are a couple of games and Gary will lead us to play. There's also a very, very interesting panel discussion Ploy is organizing. Ploy, do you want to say a few words about it?
Yes, we are going to have a panel discussion with 6 panelists from Japan. Sumili is here. From India, I believe Praveen is still here. And we have one from the UK, Adam, one from the US, Kat, and one from Mexico, Ricardo. So we are gonna have 6 of them doing the panel discussion and then talk about the future of travel. So I hope you can join us, and Minji is gonna help me facilitate the discussion as well. And Minji is gonna talk about the future of our group.
Yes, so Ploy is gonna facilitate a panel discussion with 6 speakers from 4 continents to share how they dealt with last year's situation, mainly in tourism, and how does that impact their business, their lifestyle, and share their vision for the future. Also, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of us who donated to our campaign. With that, I think so far we have got about £800, a little bit over $1,000 US. I will do a small sharing about how we spent the money and how we plan to spend the money for the growth of our community and support tourism industry for certain countries and places. We will also talk about some interesting new initiative in the future, how we will grow digitally and grow in more regions and locations. So stay with us. Please do join us for some fun games, fascinating panel discussion to hear perspectives from the globe and our trajectory for the future. Again, thank you very much, Juanita.
Thank you, Minji.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Great work. Yeah.
Really,
Thanks, everyone.
I wish you the best, and all of us wish to see you and your friends.
Yeah, keep in touch.
One day, yeah, in the future.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.